Welcome to the latest episode of First Word in Sport. How are you on this Monday morning, James?
Very good, Luke. Thank you. Yeah, busy weekend with lots of sport going on, especially football. Premier League shaking up a bit. Other European football games going on. So, yeah. Yourself?
All good. Obviously, a great set of results yesterday. I'm not going to lie. It was an enjoyable day's football. So let's crack on with it. Set Piece FC, as they're known, now only have a 4-point lead at the top. A fairly disastrous performance and result, I think, yesterday. I think we've seen Arsenal look very, very nervous without real reason at times in recent weeks. I don't quite get it, and it really came home to roost yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, booing at the end of a game against Man United at home, you just lost, but you're 4 points clear, lads. So, but it stems from the manager. It all comes from Mikel Arteta. He's just so negative, and they put so much pressure on themselves in the last. Well, they haven't won a title in 21 years, and the pressure. It's only in late January, and it's already ramping up. And it seems like we know that they can't deal with it. We know they've got history of bottling things. And yesterday was, after going 1-0 up, was a very fortunate another own goal. Martinez couldn't sort his feet out. 1-0 up, and then they just, I don't know. United came back into it. Obviously, Mbeumo had a chance when he was clean through and he didn't decide to take a shot on. Recycled it back to Fernandes. Then Saliba made that error as well that just got there in time for another Fernandes chance. Went out for a goal kick, which was actually the right decision. I think it was a guess from the referee. And then the mistake by Zubimendi, which doesn't normally make. He's been a brilliant signing for Arsenal. However, made the mistake. And Mbeumo scored, took his goal really well. He's flying from AFCON as well. And looks an inspired choice up front by Carrick to play him up front and play Dorg on the left with a bit of pace there. 1-1 at half time. And then Dorgu's finish is just outrageous, to be fair. It's like, doesn't matter who's in goal. You can have two goalkeepers there. No one's going anywhere near it. And then Arsenal panic. Arteta panics. 58 minutes. He makes 4 subs. What are you doing? Taking off Zubimendi, Odegaard, so you're changing 2/3 of your midfield. You're asking, arguably, your best player, Declan Rice, to go into position of a defensive midfielder where he's just not. It's all. Bringing on Gyökeres. Yeah, they just panicked, and it got to the fans. And once it spreads into the fans, like the Liverpool game a couple of weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago now, transfers onto the pitch and the players starting getting panicky. Get back into it. Another set piece goal. 84 minutes. Moreno scores. He's quite useful actually as a sub player now. He knows where the goal is, and it's the hardest thing in football to do, score a goal, obviously. But he's not a bad little player. But yeah, and then a couple of minutes later, Mateus Cunha scores an absolute another worldie, but David Wire's got no chance, and it's
I think I saw some stats yesterday. It was something like they created 0.39 XG or something from open play yesterday. And I think that comes back to something which we've been talking about for months, really. And it's been fairly obvious that from open play, this Arsenal team isn't amazing. And I think that comes across when you actually watch them, just from an eye test perspective. This isn't a exciting, thrilling team. It is just very, very functional. Clearly causes absolute chaos at set pieces. And it's why I think when people say this isn't a brilliant Arsenal team, it's not to take away or diminish what Arsenal are achieving. Just the way that they're achieving, it's not anti-football, but it's certainly not a team that's pleasing to watch on the eye. And the problem they have is that when it's not pleasing on the eye, is when things start going wrong. So you're on the wrong end of 2 great finishes yesterday, and you start losing games, drawing games. The pressure ramps up very quickly. If you're not playing good football with it, it just looks incredibly turgid.
Yeah, and those stats from their forwards are pretty damning as well. Saka, no goals in the last 13 appearances in all competitions. Gyökeres, no penalty goals in the last 11 Premier League. Martinelli, no goals in the last 13 Premier League games. Noni Madueke, no goals in the last 25 Premier League games. Obviously, he's not starting. Trossard, 1 in the last 11 Premier League games. All right, Gyökeres is their top goal scorer in 5, and he's not a guaranteed start anymore. We talked about it. You have to start scoring open play goals, as you said, because sometimes you're going to have games like yesterday where the opposition scored 2 great goals, or you don't score from a set piece, and they just can't attack Arsenal. They're set up to be very solid, very defensive, and then try and score either on the counter or we know from set pieces.
So I think when you watch them against teams that play in any sort of low block, they really struggle. And I just think back even to that Villa game, where they've obviously ended up winning by a handsome margin. When it was 0-0, Arsenal created very little. Obviously, they've scored the first goal from set pieces, and it's a trend all year long, is that the opening goal that they've scored, or the first goals that they've scored, have come from set pieces so often, and it changes games. It means the other team has to come out and play a little bit more, which then creates space for this Arsenal team. I think what was surprising yesterday is they'd got that slightly fortuitous goal, and they didn't then build on that. It was just so weird to see how they panicked yesterday when they took the lead. I would deem it to be pretty alarming from an Arsenal perspective.
That's the word, isn't it, coming out of the game for me? Panic with the players and panic of the 4 subs. He never normally does. He doesn't rotate at all, and then suddenly makes 4 subs on 58 minutes. I mean, there's a lot of football still left in that game. It's still the best part of 35 minutes left in the game. But onto your opposition, how well has Michael Carrick done in the last couple of games, that kind of thing? The players seem to be playing for him.
And I think you touched on it in terms of Mbeumo up front, in terms of further forward. I mean, the one is Dorgu. I mean, it helps when you're scoring goals. He obviously scored that great goal against Newcastle a few weeks ago, sort of the volley, and his confidence has just shot up, and he just looks a completely different player. And, he's not someone you'd ever have thought, we'll play him in, particularly when they have so many players in those types of positions, not so much on the left, but they have so many sort of attacking options up there. You'd never have thought Dorgu would be one of those sort of front 3.
Yeah, and to be fair to Carrick, he's obviously Sesko and Kuno on the bench. That's £130 million, 2 major summer signings. He's gone, no, actually, I want to play this way, and it's worked at the moment. Fair play to him. I didn't think he'd be anywhere near what he's done in the last couple of weeks, but maybe he doesn't show Amorim in a good way at all, if you think about it.
No, and I think the thing that's interesting about Amorim is his reluctance to obviously play Mainu. Obviously it's a different playing in the midfield too when you have 3 centre-backs behind you. Obviously it's a different formation that Mainu's coming into. But still, given the obvious need for someone in there, because Ugarte, is absolute garbage. It just seems such a sort of weird situation that Amorim found himself in to neglect Mainu.
Yeah, it just didn't trust him, didn't even play him, fed out with him massively, and didn't even bother trusting him. So,
but I think,
yeah,
I mean, but this is where it gets interesting for them. Is last week the big City game, obviously away at Arsenal, obviously incredibly tough games, but these aren't the games that are going to decide whether United finish in the top 4 or 5. It's going to be your lower to mid Premier League teams, in terms of actually getting those wins. And there's no reason why United shouldn't finish in the top 4 or 5 now. I look at Liverpool, I look at Chelsea, they don't look amazing.
And they don't play European football. They've got week off, and they're not in the FA Cup, obviously, anymore.
So let's talk about obviously Manchester City, a competent win against Wolves. It always helps when you score after 6 minutes. Just did a job, really. I mean, a pretty unexciting game. think the most interesting.
Didn't play.
Yeah, I think the most, and Doku was on the bench as well. I think the most interesting thing actually from that game was almost the VAR decision. So young or inexperienced ref decided to go to the monitor and actually back his own opinion rather than overturning, which was obviously much to Pep's frustrations. But I don't quite know why Pep was getting so animated when they've won the game. It just seemed all a little bit unnecessary.
Yeah, but then what's a shame from that is that fair play to referees actually backed his decision. And in my view, it's not a penalty. Well done to him. But you have Dale Johnson's come out and said it should have been a penalty. Former referees have come out and said it should have been a penalty. Anyway. It's just like they just want to back up their mates, and he's just gone, no, actually, I'm not part of the inner circle of referees. I'm making my own decision. I think that's refreshing, and I think players and fans alike should be applauded. He should be applauded for that.
And I don't think it's a terrible decision. Like, I mean,
no.
Given what we see, I don't. If it gets given as a penalty, fine, whatever. But I don't mind. It's not an absolute howler per se, and I think it's where some of the big managers like Pep sometimes have a little bit more responsibility than they sort of exhibit. It's unnecessary for Pep to be such a knob about things, to be honest. Let's talk about the real winners this weekend, James. Aston Villa went to Newcastle, played really well, actually. A ground where Villa have got a horrendous record in recent years. So I think went in there with very low expectations. Obviously, I find the narratives that you see on TV and hear on TV are always fascinating. So obviously Newcastle didn't have Bruno, but you would think Bruno was the only central midfielder who was missing from that game. Obviously Kamara and McGinn, obviously they're not worthy of being mentioned. Newcastle lost that game because Bruno wasn't playing. Similarly, Newcastle are tired, even though Villa had been away on Thursday night, not Wednesday night, when they'd been at home. All these sort of narratives that get sort of put out there by the TV commentators and stuff that people go with. There was no reason why Newcastle shouldn't have performed better than they did. They didn't really turn up yesterday, and obviously Howe is going to come under increasing pressure. I have to say, I thought Villa's 2 away performances this week have been 2 of the best away performances I've seen from them in a long, long time. And what was interesting about yesterday's game is if you look at the stats, Newcastle had almost doubles Villa's XG. And, people who didn't watch the game will probably go, Villa were fortunate and all this sort of stuff. Villa were dominant in that game for large parts. They wasted so many good situations. And I think that's one of the problems with XG is it doesn't encapsulate some of those situations.
Yeah, there's no metric really, is there, for not big chances, but big situations. If you're mentioning like Watkins a couple of times, bad passes, or a too long a pass when he didn't get the chance. When you're thinking, it could be a great chance to score. There's not really a metric. And as you said, if you didn't watch a game, you just looked at the stats, you're going, hang on a minute here, how did Newcastle not score? I know Martinez made a great save. I think it's a good save. I don't think it's an outstanding save from Headit, kind of looped, but he gets his feet in the right position, which allows him to make the save.
The save from Finale was very good.
Yeah, as well. Newcastle win. But how can you have? I mean, it's so important for them, but they've spent a lot of money on midfielders. Can we talk about one player, please? Anthony Gordon.
Your favourite?
I mean, I think he's absolute garbage. I really do. I don't think he's got any ability, barring pace, to beat a player. Can't cross a ball with his left foot 2 times in the first half. He just knocks it past Matty Cash and just shins it basically over the bar for a goal kick. He's got no features of a top-class left winger at all. And you're playing Harvey Barnes on the right, which is just not his position. And at the moment, Eddie Howe needs to grow a pair and play Harvey Barnes off the left. He's in much better form. I think he's a much better player than Anthony Gordon anyway. And play him there because Gordon's not anywhere near the level he should be. Obviously, he hasn't scored a goal in over a year now in the Premier League. No playing open play goals, sorry. Scored penalties, but don't count them. Yeah, he was bad. Newcastle were bad, but because Villa made them look bad. Villa were miles better yesterday.
I'd tell you who was amazing yesterday for Villa was Onana. And honestly, when you see him play like that, he's an absolute monster. If he could stay fit, there aren't many central midfielders I would take over him. I mean, the ground he covers, the sort of covering tackles, absolute. And I mean, we have to talk about Joelinton because he got made to look incredibly average by Onana in terms of in that first half. We've touched on this before and we've said it so many times, but he is literally just a thug. He, how he didn't get booked for the first, absolutely clatters into players. And there's no discernible sort of skill there either. I don't, obviously Newcastle, it feels like Newcastle get refereed a little bit differently at St James's Park. Had he put in some of those tackles elsewhere, he'd have done well to stay on the pitch in that first half. Again, we've had this conversation about Joelinton so many times. And I actually think him not being there going forward, because obviously he wimped off just after half-time with a adductor injury, it might help Newcastle actually play a bit more football.
He goes around kicking people and trying to kick people. When he plays against a player like an Onana, even like a bit like Nick O'Reilly in a cup game a week ago or 2 weeks ago now, players stand up to him. He can't go around doing it to those players. He should have been booked twice in the space of a second. He's just a thug. He's not very good at football at that level. He just runs around, kicks people, and he doesn't get booked when he should get booked. So he carries on doing it. And then eventually he complains like a little girl and or a school kid in a playground. Why have I been booked? Because you just kick people, mate. Don't start playing some football. They should play. Jacob Ramsey should be playing ahead of him. Marley should be playing ahead of him. It's so he's playing that team.
I think Eddie Howe's going to come under some pressure because, rightly or wrongly, they've got a horrendous run of fixtures coming up, and they don't look. I mean, their recruitment, obviously, we've touched on before, is looking horrendous, and I don't know how much he's to blame for that. It's always difficult to know exactly how much, but when you look at the likes of Walter Made, Wissa, Elanga, even Ramsey, I don't know what's happened to Ramsey. Is at least at Villa when Ramsey was there, he was looking to get forward and carry the ball with a little bit of aggression. What we saw what we're seeing with Ramsey, he looks a meek version of himself, and that wasn't what they were paying £40-odd million for. So I think Howe's going to be under a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and if you're a Premier League team or any team, actually, you'd be asking questions how much Bruno Guimaraes is worth in the summer and how much testing the water with him big time.
I still, Bruno Hall would be the other one I would try and get out of there. I think he always looks brilliant. I think for Villa, it's interesting in that they've actually got some very difficult games out of the way now. They've played Arsenal twice. They've played Newcastle twice. They've played the team they always lose to, Palace, twice. So Villa actually have an all right fixture list coming up, which will obviously mean they won't win another game for about 2 months. But yeah, it's who knows? If they play like they did it this week in there's 2 away games, who knows what could happen? Obviously, injuries are a problem. I just watched Villa, and I think if Ollie Watkins was good, Villa would be so dangerous. He makes, some of his off-ball stuff is brilliant, and then some of the things he does with the ball at his feet, it's just so frustrating. He's so clumsy at times. The lack of quality at times when it comes to things like finishing or passing, touch. I mean, it's amazing. He's obviously still very effective, But if there was a good version of Ollie Watkins out there, then Villa would be pretty decent.
It's almost like his brain can't reset when he's got in a position. He can't get his feet in the right position. Yeah, interesting. You're going to buy Tammy Abraham on loan, or is it a permanent? I can't quite remember.
So it'll be a permanent, and it actually leads to a question. So I did get a question from a viewer asking, what did it say? Like to know views on Villa's striker options with Marlon leaving. So obviously Villa will link with Mateta. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Palace want too much money. He's obviously also injury prone. And it looks like Abraham is the preferred option. It looks like it'll happen this week with a young lad going the other way as well as part of that deal. And I think for the money involved, it's a pretty good deal all round for Villa. If they need backup to Watkins, but they actually need someone who's vaguely like Watkins. So that was the problem with Marlon, is he was such a different type of striker. What we saw with Marlon, it was really good off the bench as a sort of complementary option, causing teams issues off the bench with his pace. But whenever he actually started games, he was very average. He wasn't a proper out-and-out number 9 in the same way Watkins is. So Abraham being there actually gives Villa backup for Watkins in that as a proper sort of number 9. And hopefully a bit of competition will also help elevate Watkins's game. But I think it's a signing that Villa had to make and make sense. One player also interesting, Leon Bailey, has come back off loan from Roma. He actually played yesterday. He did fine, actually, as an option, as an outlet. He actually looked far more dangerous than Gesson has looked all year. So I suspect it'll be interesting to see how much patience Emery has with Gesson. But yeah, but a great day yesterday for Villa. And title race firmly on, James.
Yeah, quickly on that, when you buy a replacement or you buy someone who's backup, it's actually quite key. Not on, like, goalkeepers especially, when you buy a backup, have the right feet. If the goalkeeper's right-footed, buy a backup got right foot. You've seen with Liverpool when Mammalashvili plays, it takes players a long time because their brain is so entrained of where to pass the ball if you're kicking to right footer to left footer. And when you're buying it like an Abraham, he is a very similar player to Watkins. Not very similar, but similar-ish.
Similar enough.
Yeah, similar enough. That the players will know that Abraham will make the same runs as Watkins and he'll do the same work as him off the ball as well. So it helps the team in that regard, rather than, say, buying a nimble striker or a left footer, for example. It's quite, you do need to have the players of similar profiles just to help the player and help the team. So it doesn't, you don't go to Thursday night or a suspension or an injury and you've got to play a different way because you're changing one player in your team.
Obviously, it just felt like a great weekend all round. Obviously, the next game we'll talk about was obviously Liverpool losing 3-2 to Bournemouth. Honestly, a great weekend of football this was. Obviously, one of the big takeaways will be Slot. And we'll come on to that. I mean, you can come on to that now. As someone who, obviously, I watched that game. The margins from football are so fine in terms of the narratives and stuff. But you haven't played particularly well recently. You didn't play particularly well again. What did you make of it all?
Rinse and repeat. Cut and paste for Slot in the Premier League. And he's complaining about wind and he's complaining about players are tired. Well, you have plenty of opportunity to rest and rotate players on Saturday. Could have played Jones, could have played Robertson. Why did you play Kirkhead for 45 minutes and then change him? He's in the red zone because your physios have told him.
Hold on. Let me get my violin out for Slot for not having enough squad depth, having spent £400 million or whatever it was in the summer, right? If you spend that money and you don't address your squad issues in terms of depth, and then you're short players, no one to blame but yourself or the recruitment team at Liverpool. You don't have that many injuries at the moment.
No, agree with you. So 2 points. This £450 million narrative needs to stop. We spent less money net compared to Arsenal. They didn't strengthen the squad. They strengthened the 11, Liverpool. Yeah, he plays 14 players he only trusts, which is fine in Holland. But in the Premier League, when you're travelling to Marseille on a Wednesday night and then you come back, use your squad. He doesn't use it. And is it any surprise that Virgil at 34, 35 can't always play to the peak of his powers? Not really. It's a bad mistake, obviously, for the first goal. Second goal, he's slightly behind play. They take it well. But then they change 3 of the back 4 again, and you move your most important player, probably, Szoboszlai, to right back, which he clearly hates. He changed formation again. I'm getting sick and tired of people defending him in the media as well, saying the players are lazy, the narrative, it's always the player's fault. And I'm sick to the back teeth of saying it, but when every player is not playing well, it comes down to one person. It's a coach or the manager, whoever you want to describe him as. I think it's TikTok, the way he's going to be sacked. We talked about it yesterday briefly. Karabag on Wednesday night, it's a massive game in terms of being inside the top 8, an extra couple €1 million for winning a game. So you don't really want to sack him now. And then you got Newcastle Saturday night, and then you got off. I can't see him, regardless of these 2 results, I just can't see him being lasting now. I think the players know it, the fans know it. It's just waiting to get, if they can get their number 1 choice, which I believe to be Alonso, I think. Or does he wait to the summer and then you get an interim in? I think it's just game over with Slot. And this is not reactionary. I've talked about it on this pod and off pod.
Months.
It's been 11. They've won 5 Premier League games since September. 5. It's unacceptable when a Liverpool manager sets up a team not to lose.
It's unacceptable, James, when you spend £500 million in the summer.
They've bought some good players. They've got some very good players. They do need, obviously, a lot more recruitment. But yeah, anyway. Bournemouth, fair play. Their first, they've had 1 win in 14, and yeah, anyway.
Well, I think the Bournemouth one is a little bit interesting as well in terms of Areola, in terms of, obviously, they were having that dreadful run of form recently. Obviously, they changed a little bit. They got the result away at Chelsea, and that sort of stemmed the tide. Oh, they've obviously got a result against United as well, didn't they? And then obviously they got the Semenyo winner against Tottenham, and then obviously got the winner yesterday late on. And it's amazing the sort of change in narrative around Areola on the basis of 2 stoppage time goals, actually. I mean, I always talk about how fine the margins are in football. And I think for Areola, he's been on the right end probably of, two situations where, things have gone his way. It's not to say he doesn't deserve it, given the injuries they have and selling players and all these sorts of things, and the way he actually tries to play football. So I'd never begrudge him that, but it just highlights just how razor thin the margins are at the top level. Just quickly, Van Dijk. I think Van Dijk's an interesting one because obviously the biggest problem he has is how laid back he always looks. So when things are going great, it looks amazing. And Ezri Konsa has this a little bit at Villa as well. When things are going well, I always use the word Rolls Royce of a defender. Things look amazing. But when things don't go well, and obviously he made multiple errors in that game, it looks like you don't care. And that's obviously not the case, but it just visually looks terrible.
Yeah, but he finishes a game with Endo next to him. He hasn't played in months. They took 7 minutes to get Endo on. What are you doing, Liverpool? What are you doing, Slot? And he's complaining there, going, I was shouting at players. Chuck a football onto the pitch. Chuck Freddie Woodman, your second.
You had possession of the ball. You had possession of the ball. You could have kicked it out, right? So there's nothing there that, he made a conscious decision to delay that substitution, right? He could have easily told his players to kick the ball out, and they didn't do it. And you paid the price. That's on him as a manager. That is a really, when you talk about in-play management and what separates good managers and not so good managers, it's things like that in terms of and the substitutions they make and all these sorts of things that you get judged by.
It was amazing last year. He was making in-game substitutions that were all working. And this year he's just gone against his principles. Yeah. Where would Liverpool be without the boss, by the way? It'd be very worrying where they would be in the league. He's a heck of a player. He really is. He's been sensational this season.
Are we allowed to call Liverpool set piece FC as well?
First time they scored in the corner, thinking, oh, God knows how long. I think, yeah.
I want to touch on Crystal Palace Chelsea. I think Crystal Palace. We'll come on to Crystal Palace in a moment. Obviously, Chelsea won 3-1. It was again a slightly weird game. Chelsea had been involved in a few weird games under Robertson, in as much as they didn't deserve to beat Brentford last weekend. In this particular game, it was slightly against the run of play. Obviously, they've been the beneficiaries of a defensive mistake, which has put Esteval through. He scored, taking his chance. Not quite sure what Henderson's doing, but obviously a really good finish. Obviously, he's a quality player. Even the second goal, a few question marks about Henderson, led to Pedro's goal in terms of coming out or not. Third goal penalty I thought was incredibly harsh, but obviously Chelsea are in a situation where it's 3-0 up, game over. They didn't play particularly well again, and they've got a great result. I think it will catch up with Chelsea at some point. I think for Palace, they have so many issues on the horizon, not least the fact that they are potentially looking over their shoulders now down towards West Ham and what they're up to. They're only 8 points clear of West Ham now.
Yeah, Mateta should have scored after 8 minutes. Good save by Sanchez. Changed the Deans Henderson had first goal, maintain it straight down the middle. He dives like almost back on himself, rather than if he stands up straight, he probably saves that. Second goal's his fault. Should have come out, cleared everyone out. Yeah, there are obviously there's big rumours about Wharton in the summer. Would anyone bite the bullet and bid for him in the next week or so? Who knows? Mateta wants out. Glasman knows going. Yeah, worrying times if you're a Palace fan there. Chelsea, one last takeaway from it. Are they a better side with Palmer in it or a better side without him? Because I like Enzo in that 10. I like Esteval on the right and Neto on the left. It's quite a balanced. And then obviously João Pedro is probably a better 9.5, 10 than he is a 9. You know, it's the narrative of Palmer, but are they a better team without him at the moment? Probably. Where does he get back in that team?
Well, you can't drop Esteval. I mean, it would be in the 10. I mean, because the other problem is that, you know, I quite like Santos is growing on me in the middle as an option in there alongside Caicedo. It just gives them that much more steel, should we say, in there. So it'll be interesting. I suspect Rossini wouldn't have the balls to drop him though.
Something to look at in the next couple of months anyway.
Just touching on Mateta, I think it's interesting that obviously has been linked with Villa, Juventus. Obviously, Palace want 40 million for him, which just seems like a pipe dream. Obviously, Palace have a history of holding out transfer-wise in terms of trying to get big money. It is interesting when you look at the history of Palace. Is Parish, you know, he talks a very good game in terms of, oh, he's not leaving. We want this money. When you actually look at his record in the transfer market and how he's dealt with situations, it hasn't been brilliant. So if you look at Gerhi, for example, obviously turned down big money in the summer and even 2 years ago. He ends up walking away 20 million. I wouldn't say that Parish has covered himself in glory, particularly with the way he's handled Gerhi. Elise left not huge amounts. Eze wasn't, you know, given how well he was playing at the time. I don't think, you know, Mateta situation, I don't think, you know, he can play hardball all he wants, but I don't think they're going to get anywhere near the money that they want for him. I think Wharton will obviously be off in the summer as well. If I would be worried as a Palace fan, it's not just performances on the pitch. I mean, they're benefited by the fact Munoz is back and Sarr's back, which will help. And I do wonder if they'll go into they'll look at that league table and go, maybe we need to spend some money. But what you end up with is something which we sort of touched on before, is that they're trying to recruit. They look at trying to bring new players in to try and strengthen that squad. But Glasner has a very specific style of play. Are you bringing in players that are going to suit Glasner's style, or are you looking to bring in players who potentially suit a different manager who comes in the summer? Because what you can't be doing is recruiting players for Glasner's system now, knowing he's leaving in the summer.
Correct. You can't. I would 1.1. I'd get rid of Glasner now, because what's the point in trying to keep him to the summer when you know you're going, and all your recruitment now for whether you're going to buy in January or for the summer, you don't know who your manager is. So how can you go to agents and players and say, "I'll come and join us"? Well, they're going to go, "Well, who's the manager and what formation, what tactics we're playing?" And secondly, on Parish, clubs have got to be careful on what they wish for. Because if you start treating players badly in regards of overpricing them or not letting them go to other clubs, you've got to know your pecking order. Other players and other agents will get and they go, hang on a minute here, if it's Palace or it's going to, say, a Fulham or a Sunderland, when their players are getting treated better regarding future, come here to stepping stone to another big club. You've got to be careful what you do. You can't treat players like, hold them to ransom, for example. You kind of got to allow them to go on if they want to, they're able to. You can't just say, no, you can't go anywhere, we overprice you. Because you won't get those players in the future, because they'll go think twice and go, actually, if I go there and I improve and someone else comes in for me, I might not go. And then eventually they won't come back in for me. I get one chance to go to a big club. You can't always be, this is the price and you can't go. Yeah, agree with you, Parish. Sometimes, a bit like Daniel Levy at Tottenham when he did it as well. At times, works both ways. Can't be a hard businessman, but you've got to allow these players and agents to go on.
Let's talk about the relegation, because there were some interesting results. So West Ham are throwing the cat amongst the pigeons a little bit with their back-to-back wins now. Beat Sunderland 3-1. This is the sort of game I always find quite interesting, because everyone obviously looks at it and goes, Sunderland poor, West Ham obviously win easily. But there's a large part of it where they were just clinical. They took their chances. And we see this in football all the time. And I don't think it probably gets enough credit almost. Is obviously the first goal, great ball in by Bowen. Nice finish from a really good header from Somerville. Not something you necessarily associate with a wide player. Really good header. Obviously, the second goal was just really poor defending. It was a very soft penalty. Obviously scored the penalty. Fernandez scores a worldie. So when you actually look at the three goals, there's obviously one good goal in there for the header. You've also got a penalty and a worldie. Some days it's just your day. Some days it's not. And it was clearly West Ham's day. And obviously they've held on pretty comfortably in the end. And it's just an amazing result. And I think, I was probably slightly critical of West Ham in terms of what they were doing in the transfer market with regard to Castellanos and Pablo, but they seem to have made a difference. They've just given them something different in those forward areas. And whilst they're still big favourites to get relegated, they have given themselves a chance.
Back-to-back wins, 6 points makes a lot of difference in this league when you've got...
I think we're in a really interesting situation, because whilst they were rubbish, I'm not saying they're great suddenly by any stretch of the imagination, but whilst they were rubbish, all the teams above them just felt that much more comfortable. So you look at a team like Leeds. So obviously they're now only 5 points ahead of West Ham. Obviously it was 11, 10 plus points not so long ago. 5 starts getting pretty serious, to be honest.
And Forest winning yesterday as well at Brentford.
Right. So, but if West Ham can find a couple of wins soon, you might have a couple of big teams in Tottenham and Crystal Palace getting a little bit nervous. Spurs are only 15 to get relegated. they have to be super careful. They've got a really tough run of fixtures coming up as well. They could easily, if West Ham can find a couple of results, you could see a couple of big teams get pretty nervous, I think.
It's a big goal by Romero at Burnley on Saturday for Tottenham. So I was just having a look there. So
his finishing is unbelievable.
But Charlison's got 7 goals in Premier League. Their joint second goal scorers are Mickey van de Ven with 4 and Romero with 4. And then Paulinho's got 3. So he's just like,
and two of those were overhead kicks.
They could be very careful. Surely they can't keep Frank. It was just anyway.
So they didn't play that badly in that game. So they were dominant in that first half, relatively.
So they should be. Burnley, who are absolutely garbage.
They have an incredible ability to lose their way. Once Tuanzebe equalised, I don't know, they just lost their way a little bit in the middle part of that game. When Burnley actually took the lead, it wasn't massively surprising. Obviously, at the end, Tottenham have come on really strong again and actually been unlucky not to score before Romero equalised. Simons hit the bar and things like that. They created some good chances, but I always say when things aren't going your way, you end up drawing these games rather than nicking the odd winner. I think what you'll find with Frank again is obviously in the same way with Liverpool and Slot, they obviously have a dream tie really against Eintracht Frankfurt in the midweek. They couldn't ask for a better tie. Obviously win that one and they are in the top 8, which would be an unbelievable achievement really, given how well they've played or not this season. So I don't think any decisions are going to come in the next few days with regard to Frank. But, I guess the transfer window will be interesting with Frank as to whether they back him or not.
Problem is backing him. Yeah, they've got a load of injuries. But when all these players come back fit, you've got a bloated squad.
And there's no guarantee of Europe next year.
Yeah.
So obviously in the relegation, obviously a massive win for Forest yesterday away at Brentford. Certainly wasn't what I expected to happen. I think again it shows you take your chances. Brilliant finish from Jesus. It came out of nothing really. I mean, Forest actually started that game as the better team. They were on top. Obviously they took that chance. And then what you see with these games is, and you see it with teams like Everton as well, so sort of Dyche, Moyes teams, is they'll sit back and they are very, very difficult to break down. And obviously, Awoni's added a second on the break. Brentford were a little bit wasteful at times. It was obviously a 1-1 that Ouattara messed up. Things like that could have changed the game. But Forest were able to sit back and, these Premier League teams are becoming very, very effective at holding on to these leads in these types of situations.
Why set pieces and long throws back in vogue because it's one way of causing chaos in the box kind of thing.
But massive win for Forest. They've looked so poor at times. I'm not sure they didn't play amazingly yesterday, but it's just an amazing result for them.
4 away wins yesterday, 4 home wins on Saturday and 1 draw. Burnley let us down. That's why it's been 5 home wins and 4 away wins out to 9 games.
Can we just take it? Obviously, Fulham, a good win against Brighton. Do have to say, Verbruggen, you have to save that free kick from Wilson. You have to save it. He is just not a keeper I particularly rate. He makes so many mistakes.
Yeah, Harry Wilson in goals again. It'd be interesting to see what happens to him in the summer. He's talked about it last week. He's out of contract in the summer and he's put his contract talks on hold with Fulham. So
someone will massively overpay for him.
You can't overpay that much for him when he's on a free in June, isn't he?
Yeah, but I think someone relatively will give him a contract that probably on the high side, I suspect.
Would Tottenham cheeky bid for him? Have another right-sided forward.
I think that's all the games. Obviously, Everton Leeds tonight. Everton, Grealish is missing. They get the AFCON boys back. Whether they start, I mean, apparently they came into training on Friday. They should be fit to start in DA and Guille. Obviously, Grealish out will be a miss for them. Dewsbury Hall still out. It'll be an interesting game. I mean, Leeds have got a couple of issues with Goodmanson, and Bijol was out as well. But I'm intrigued to see this game only as much as like in terms of Leeds, how they press Everton and what Everton do to sort of counter that a little bit. It's not the most glamorous of ties on a Monday night, let's be honest, but it'll still be interesting. It's really important for Leeds actually to try and get something out of that game, given how the table's now looking.
I think the two lads will have to play for Everton just because of their situation with no Grealish. I think Ndiaye will have to play. Will be key for them to some sort of creativity. And it's scary how often players go back to their former clubs and score goals. It wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, wouldn't surprise me at all if Calvert-Lewin scores. I hope he celebrates. This nonsense of not celebrating at your former clubs, just get on with it. You have no affiliation with them, barring you play for them as whatever. I know he came up through the academy, but anyway, it is an interesting game. And that first goal, if there is a goal, or if these get ahead of it, Everton fans might start asking questions again, kind of thing. Yeah, but.
So in terms of other football, the big result, obviously yesterday, Hearts drew 2-2 with Celtic. Celtic had players sent off. Trusty sort of changed the game a little bit there. Hearts got a relatively late equaliser. Big result for Hearts in the end, of just avoiding defeat keeps them in, keeps Celtic at, sort of touching distance.
Yes. Couple of things out. Celtic, I saw a stat on that. Celtic's first goal from a direct free kick for 5 years, 86 attempts. Just remarkable how dominant they've been. Yeah, 2-2 is not a bad result for Hearts. Obviously, Celtic had a man sent off as well. So they might think it's a missed opportunity, considering that Rangers beat Dundee 3-0 at the same time. And another stat from that of James Tavernier scored his 100th league goal for Rangers. He's a right back. It's amazing. He's got over 150 league goals in his career. He's a right back. Barca won as well, 3-0. I don't know if you've seen it, but Yamal's goal to make it 3-0, the volley from just inside the box against Oviedo was brilliant. Real Madrid won. Mbappe scored his 20th and 21st league goals of the season. Scored a Pineka. Dedicated it to Brahim Diaz. I mean, cheated it all. Whatever, but he scored. Munich lost to relegation-threatened Augsburg at home. So their 27-game beaten run gone. Kane obviously didn't score. Delise scored. So yeah, that was a shock. Italy had Roma drew 1-1 with AC last night. Juve battered Napoli 3-0. The Turkish lad scored. He's an interesting player. I'd imagine some teams might be sniffing around him, Yildiz, in the summer as well. And Inter on Friday night, 1-6-2. And this is where the Premier League, I get a little bit frustrated. They don't help British teams in Europe by changing fixtures. Like Inter playing on Friday night, PSG played on Friday night, just to give that extra 24, 36 hours to recover for European games. I know it's to do with a lot of European fans don't really travel as much as the British lads do. But when you see Sunderland playing 12:30 on a Saturday morning in London, they can change the game if they want to. They should do, but they don't. So, yeah, going back to Serie A, Inter are now 5 clear of AC Milan and 9 clear of Roma and Napoli. Napoli are struggling a bit.
So, in terms of, I see at Leicester, Cifuentes, how we pronounce it, has been sacked. Leicester's always an interesting one. In terms of, obviously the poster boys for the fairy tale success, and then obviously subsequent mismanagement, arguably. But it also shows you how hard it is when you sort of get a taste for the success to try and kick on to the next level. It's, obviously you're paying big wages, and eventually it all caught up with them. Obviously, they're struggling in Championship now. I think they are down in 14th place. I think they're 9 points clear of Blackburn in terms of relegation. But where it gets interesting for Leicester is I don't know if they're going to get a points deduction at some point for all their financial fair play breaches that they had, which could potentially, really set the club back. I mean, I was looking at their team earlier, and they still have so many players who must be on some pretty decent money still from Premier League days. I know that they're taking some reduction, but they've still got a lot of players on decent money. And I suspect they'll also find that they're decent youngsters like Fatwa and Jeremy Monga won't be around for long either. It's the problem you have. Teams will come in, just pick off your best assets. It's just brutal. And it's just a real shame. It's not a shame at all, let's be honest. I'm not going to lie. One thing I did want to touch on a little bit was injury reporting. So a good example would be Saturday, Man City game, Nunes. Pep obviously sat there in a press conference day before, said Nunes will not be fit this weekend with illness. Obviously, he starts that game, no issues. And the way football deals with injuries is so different to other sports like American football. These news conferences, I don't even know why they bother doing them at times. You only have to look how little information an Arteta will give. In this day and age, with information being so important, it almost feels like they should go down the NFL route where you have to submit formalized lists of players in terms of injury designations. And so you don't get these surprises in the way that you do. It's just a joke. You can't be saying to people that, Nunes isn't going to play, and then he does play. I don't know. Maybe I'm just looking at that with a sort of betting hat on. It just feels like it's really poorly handled by the Premier League.
Yeah, it's all the football managers lie in press conferences. They're only doing it because they have to, because contractually by the Premier League and clubs, you have to go to press conferences. You have to do press conferences after the game as well. You have to put a player up for 3 really bland questions as well before the game. That's done 2 hours before the game. How are you feeling? Yeah, great. Looking forward to the game. Yeah, great. Good luck. Thanks. And it's just contracted. You have to do it. It's just part of football. Yeah, you can't read anything really into managers' press conferences because, like Eddie Howe said, they were happy on Friday, as we said, that Bruno he was never going to play. And they are talking he might play on Wednesday night. He won't play Wednesday night, I doubt it, with that ankle injury.
Yeah, I just don't think it's, I don't think it's particularly satisfactory. Let's have a quick touch on transfer window. Obviously, the deadline is a week to today. There hasn't been huge amounts of activity really up to this point. We see teams like Fulham obviously linked with Oscar Bob for, I think it was 35 million. They were linked with another. Who was the other player they were linked with?
£28 million PSV forward Pepe. I've never heard of him either. But Oscar Bob seems to have gone a little bit quiet, hasn't it? So there's been no noise at. Paqueta Flamengo have bid 35 million sterling for him. I'd imagine he will go. I think there's a acceptance of West Ham for him to go. Strand Larson, Leeds, did £33 million bid, got turned down on the weekend. It's an awful lot of money. Wolves want 40. You could probably see that happening. If you're honest with yourselves, like Strand Larson probably going, I'm not getting in the Wolves team. I don't want to be relegated.
He's not going to start. He's not going to start ahead of DCL though.
No, but they might play him together. 3-5-2.
I mean, it could do. I mean, instead of Okafor or Aronson or whoever, or Nemetra. I guess let's talk about Robertson, because that was an interesting story that broke on Friday. There was a lot of speculation that Robertson was going to go to Tottenham. It felt slightly weird on a few different levels. Subsequently, today or yesterday, it looks like that's not going to happen. But part of the reason for it not happening is that Tsimikas is meant to come back from his loan spell. He's at Roma, I think, and they're struggling for replacements. It's a strange one because you're never quite sure as to what the terms of the loan are. But normally a team can recall a player. I mean, it depends. As I say, it depends on the terms and conditions. But it's all not awkward when you have players who look like they're leaving and then they're not suddenly.
Yeah, we don't know the ins and outs of it, but it looks like Robertson's told Liverpool that he wanted to play, and Johnny Heitner, obviously the first team coach at Spurs, had probably said, "Hey, come, do you want fancy playing?" He's probably guaranteed first team minutes there at Tottenham, which is always a dangerous case to be guaranteeing players minutes. I don't like that idea at all. Yeah, Liverpool can't get Tsimikas back, so they're not going to let Robertson go. Obviously, Gomez is now injured, and no surprise there. Yeah, an odd one. Obviously, big leadership, big voice in dressing room. Looks like he's staying.
Okay,
I just don't know. I mean, we talked about slot. I just don't know what's going on at the club at the moment. So
I'm always slightly skeptical of in terms of the value of what's termed to be leadership, particularly with the way clubs are sort of run now. It's not like these young kids are in the pub all day, every day. You know, these guys are all incredibly professional in terms of these youngsters, in terms of, you know, their training. Every training session's monitored, right? So if players are, you know, messing around in training, it's just not going to happen much these days. I'm sure it happens somewhat, and I understand you may want a calm head on the pitch and all those sorts of things. But I look at that Tottenham situation with Robertson. Obviously, big wages. Talk about him starting. Is he a starter ahead of a doggy? Well, if he's a starter ahead of a doggy, then a doggy is one of the bigger flops I've seen in recent times. Because from someone who promised so much, I know he's had his injury problems. There's no way he shouldn't be starting ahead of a 31-year-old Robertson who looks like an old 31-year-old from everything I've seen recently. I just find, you know, I realise that Spencer's actually been played further forward, almost like sort of almost left wing at times. You know, there may well be a role for Robertson within that squad. I just still, you know, given that Tottenham's, you know, the league campaign isn't happening particularly this season. You know, you're not going to buy him to try and get Champions League football or anything like that. You know, obviously you've only got the Champions League. Does Andy Robertson make a difference to Tottenham winning the Champions League? No. I just find it all a bit of a weird direction that Tottenham were going in.
Yeah, Robertson's been garbage for 2.5 years. Let's be honest about it. You know, his legs have gone. Yeah, the leadership thing. It is. He is a big voice in that dressing room. They've lost a couple of players as well in the summer, Liverpool. But it did annoy me back in the day when you had Henderson and Milner, the standard bearers, the press setters, the people, absolute nonsense. Don't tell me that the likes of Salah, Alisson, and Virgil van Dijk aren't the leaders in that dressing room. Yeah, looks like it's not going ahead. So interesting times ahead. The only one that came out of Europe was that Joe Fernandez, the young lad at Barcelona, just turned 18, attacking midfielder. He looks like he's off to PSG. He wants game time at Barcelona. They can't give it to him. They've got too many players in that position. They can play Ferran, Lopez, Dani Olmo. So he looks like he's off to PSG. Do not think that Hansi Flick is best pleased with the way that's turned out. He looked real talent.
Quick question for you, right? So how much was that transfer fee being talked about?
Pass. I don't really know how much it is, but there was a lot of chatter over the weekend that he's going to PSG in the summer.
All right, let's compare him just to one player quickly. Just a quick, you know, Oscar Bob, right? Oscar Bob is being linked for £35 million to Fulham. How would you think he compares to someone like Oscar Bob?
Different level to him. What I've seen of him.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, you're talking £35 million for Oscar Bob. Football, crazy. All right, let's have a quick look at, obviously, this week we have Champions League and we have Europa League. Final week 8 for both tournaments. It's where everything gets decided. Champions League is looking very interesting. Arsenal obviously going to win or finish top of the group stages, which is some effort. Likely to finish with 8 wins. They play Karat Almaty. Obviously should win. Makes very little difference to anything. But there's a whole series of interesting situations behind that. So obviously Liverpool currently have 15 points, Tottenham 14, Newcastle, Chelsea, Manchester City all have 13 points. So the top 8 teams qualify. To give you a quick, we've got a friend who obviously does a lot of stats. I will get him on the show at some point. JK, he obviously crunches a lot of numbers. Some of the numbers he crunched over the weekend, before any price moves, this was. But he had Liverpool as finishing in the top 8 as almost 96% chance. Tottenham almost 57%. Man City 66%. Newcastle almost 15%, and Chelsea 35% chance of finishing those top 8 positions. It's always interesting just to see some sort of context. Yeah, I mean, some really interesting games. And, you know, what? Obviously, you have Liverpool should be a bit of a gimme against Karabag, which would then see, obviously, that's why Liverpool are at almost 96% chance of finishing that top 8.
Yeah, Liverpool should beat Karabag on Wednesday night. Should being the operative word, but you never know.
So I mean,
Tottenham are lucky that they've had an easy schedule. By the way, their previous 7 games have been one of the easiest schedules, if not the easiest schedule, certainly amongst English clubs. Anyway, they're away at Frankfurt. Frankfurt just can't stop conceding goals. And I see that Tottenham are now odds on there to go and win there on Wednesday night, which I find ridiculous. Tottenham odds on away from home would never.
All right. So I think what's interesting about this is obviously Tottenham were odds against Burnley at the weekend. So what you're saying is effectively is they have more chance of winning away at Frankfurt than they did at Burnley. Burnley are dreadful. I think it just puts into context how bang average this Frankfurt team is. So obviously, I mean, it's also why Frank isn't going anywhere in the next day or two. Obviously, it's been a good test for Spurs because I'm still not sold that Spurs are, that great under Frank. How he approaches that, he tends to be slightly negative at times. That's not a game where you want to be negative. You want to take it to Frankfurt. You get so many opportunities.
Yeah, they'll get a load of opportunities on Wednesday night. It's just whether Solanke can take his chances, and I don't know what. Well, they'll have to play him because they've got no one. Oh, Moani can play, can't he? So I wonder if he will start. Actually, he seems to be more suited to European football. Obviously, the lad from PSG they've got on loan, I think he is. Chelsea away at Napoli. Napoli, as I said earlier, are in terrible form. Can't buy a win at the moment. Just got thumped last night at Juve, who are downright average as well. But it's always a tricky place to go. Napoli are outside the top 24. I think they're in 25th position. So they need a result anyway to get in the top 24. If they don't qualify in the top 24, it'd be a pretty of a shock, to be honest. So never easy to go to Naples for Chelsea.
So on that exact point, I would say about Eintracht Frankfurt, they can't qualify. So they can't make the top 24, right? So everything about that game.
Play for.
Exactly. So everything about that game is setting up nicely for Spurs.
Yeah, and then, the Arsenal games are relevant because they're playing the worst team. They could put out their under-15s, and Arsenal need to put out their reserve team. It makes no difference to Arsenal apart, and they'll beat them with none of their players should be on the bench as well. Just completely disregard it. Give them the week off. Don't even bring them to the stadium as players. Yeah, you can watch it in the stands with your wives and your girlfriends in the boxes, but they don't need to be on the bench. Don't need to be going through the whole rigmarole of match day and then going to bed late when you've been playing or you're training. Literally, just play. Whoever you want to play in that game, it's irrelevant. They don't need to play. Looking at it, Man City at home to Galatasaray. Still some pressure on Man City though. They don't want those 2 extra games. These 2 extra games, you just need that week off, the midweek game off. Those 2 games.
I mean, it just makes such a big difference, because what you end up with is you almost end up with, obviously depending when the international breaks are and things like that, it's just utterly relentless. If you have Champions League, Premier League, Champions League, Premier League, Champions League, and then obviously for City, they will have Carabao Cup in there as well. The last thing this City team feels like needs is more games. What might be interesting about the City situation is that their goal difference isn't brilliant. So there's a very good chance that this the top 8 places could get decided by goal difference. City's is only +4. You look at teams like Newcastle, there's +10, Chelsea +6. Goal difference could matter in those top 8 places. It'd be interesting to see what sort of team.
Yeah, I don't know where Luke's gone there, but interesting what Newcastle you're back there. Goal difference will play a part, I think, because Newcastle won't want to go and get spanked in Paris on Wednesday night at all. They won't want to go and open up there. But it might suit Newcastle just to actually sit back and try and stop the space behind them, stop Dembele, Barcola, Kieran, whoever they start up front, and try and use the pace from, they should play Elanga or Murphy. I don't think Jacob Murphy's fit, is he? But play Barnes off to the left, as I say. But they could cause some problems. They're not too bad away from home, Newcastle.
I always look at Newcastle at the moment. Yeah, but I look at Newcastle at the moment, there's one position that just stands out, looms large, and that's right back. Trippier has been finished for quite some time, I think. And, him up against some of these Paris Saint-Germain attackers, good luck. And we have seen it before where I wouldn't be surprised if Burn is fit, if Newcastle went with a back 5 effectively, had maybe bring Burn in at centre back and play wing backs, Hall left wing back. You could play Miley right wing back. I wouldn't be surprised. You would not want to get Trippier exposed one-on-one. It was something interesting to see.
Yeah, that's a good shout. And then you could play 2 up front. You could play 2 pacey players up front. You could play Gordon and Barnes if you want to, or you could play Barnes and.
Well, Gordon can play as that strike. Gordon will play as that's one of those strikers. He's played that number 9 role, and actually he's not bad at it, relatively. Obviously relatively, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility.
Yeah, actually, that's a very good point. I wouldn't surprise me if they do go 3-5-2 and try and when they do get set pieces, obviously Burn can be a nuisance if they do get a chance. Obviously, the key for them is.
Yeah, just keep it tight and hope you can nick a goal on set pieces, type of thing. They're not going to go to Paris Saint-Germain and play them off the park. I wouldn't have thought anyway. It'd be hugely unlikely.
I think they'll go. But it is if Bruno's fit or not. If Bruno's not fit, then it's a tough night there because they won't have anyone who actually get hold of the ball. We've got Tonali, yeah, but they do need Bruno. I just can't see him back fit. It was a nasty twist of an ankle last week when they played PSV and they gifted 2 goals. Yeah. All games on at the same time, 8 o'clock UK time, 9 o'clock European time CET. So that's Wednesday night.
I remember from last year, it is quite good because it does change a lot. So given the permutations, in terms of a goal here and there, it really matters. So as long as your team's not on the wrong end of it, it can be pretty exciting stuff. And I think with so many teams in contention there, it should be quite interesting viewing.
I wonder how managers and teams on the benches keep up to date with that, and how they get that information across to the players on the pitch.
Have you seen these apps, James? They're called live score sites.
I know, but you could easily have a goal going in and then suddenly it's not because there's VAR 4 or 5 minutes later kind of thing, and your game's still going on. It's not like you can hang on a minute, we'll pause our game for 5 minutes because there's a VAR decision that takes 3 or 4 minutes to make a decision.
Yeah, I mean, something managers and players have to be aware, in terms of how aggressive they are and otherwise on the pitch. I mean, it's always a bit like golf where it's like, oh, don't look at leaderboards. You should want to know exactly where you're at in terms of these games, and it should matter, as to how aggressive you are or otherwise in terms of tactics.
Yeah, you might be 2-0 up, 3-0 up, and you still might be out the top 8 or the top 24. Where every place makes a difference, and you might go, "Oh, I need another goal here to get the goal difference to get in." It could come down to that in the last 5-10 minutes, where teams have won the game and they need a goal because they need to get an extra goal difference. Yeah, it will. The way it's set up, it will be exciting on Wednesday night.
Thursday night, we've got Europa League. Villa Salzburg, Forest against Ferencváros. Forest can't finish top 8. They'll finish in the top 24. So they don't have huge amounts to play for there. I wouldn't be surprised to see them rest lots of players. For Villa, that result against Fenerbahce and Midtjylland, obviously late equaliser to make a draw, means that Villa are currently in second place. Villa win there and they'll finish in those top 2 places, and it will see them get home ties for the last, rest in the second leg for the rest of the way, which I think Emery deems to be pretty important. So I'm intrigued to see what sort of team Villa actually put out there. I mean, they should be resting players, but I know Emery will want to win that game. I think they've got Brentford on Sunday, but that is at home, which makes things just a little bit easier.
I think you go out and try and win the game in the first half, and then you rest players. So I would see the likes of Rodgers playing, Brendier, Watkins, probably the same team that you played yesterday, to be honest. If there's no other injuries, try and win the game and then take them off 55, 60 minutes.
Yeah, I think the only sort of changes that potentially make would, I wouldn't be averse to seeing the likes of Torres sit out. Lindelof can play. Bezo in goal ahead of Martinez, no issues with. And also, I think Bogard would start in midfield just because we're short. Tielemans obviously got injured yesterday. Don't know how bad he is. But it'd be interesting. But I mean, there's not a huge jeopardy on that Europa League in terms of the English teams.
You got Celtic playing as well. Rangers are out, but Celtic will need a result to get in the top 24 as well.
So obviously, been lots of football, lots coming this week. Obviously, another Premier League at the next weekend, coming thick and fast. Anything else, James?
No, I think the pod changed, just some housekeeping. So we'll do this recorded Monday morning. We'll do a sports one recorded Monday night, and that'll be out this evening or tomorrow morning as well. We're talking about doing a Thursday review of the Champions League rather than doing it for the previews for Saturday's games on Friday. TBC, we'll let you know on the socials what we decide. But yeah, any questions, any things you want us to discuss regarding format or anything you want to discuss, let us know, whether it's email or comments here or on Spotify, on Apple as well. So please let us know. So apart from that,
I would say if you're enjoying the podcast or you have any feedback, obviously like, subscribe, all the sort of things that people tell you. I think it does make a difference in terms of the number of people who actually are able to sort of find the show and everything else. So it does, particularly in the early stages, it does matter. So if you are enjoying it, tell people. And yeah, I mean, we're obviously looking to try and improve it all the time as well. So we'll get there eventually in terms of what we think is, the best format. But any suggestions, any feedback, just let us know.
Yep. Speak to you later, Luke.
Brilliant. Thanks.